Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, she's working aggressively and, she's not really going out because she's not used to going with a walker, and she says she falls, she's had, so, they think she's gonna come back, and they say it's gonna take more time, and she doesn't have much appetite, and we're trying to
Or sweet
the meal very appealing.
That's right.
Hi, Barbara.
Well, I know it affects both of you, so you guys gotta get used to it.
Yeah, so,
It's hard, it's yeah.
That's right next to King's, right?
it's definitely slow, that's for sure.
Sending,
Thank you for letting me know.
sending hugs.
So,
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
She's coming along, she still reads the New York Times from the first page to the last.
Really? Well, that's great. That takes a while. Yeah.
Indeed
For
it
anybody.
does.
Yeah.
Indeed it does. So, our children are very helpful.
How many are there?
There are 3 here, and 1 in California.
Okay.
He's coming for a visit in June, so I'm bringing 2 grandchildren.
Is that
So,
Adam?
that's Adam.
Those in California?
Yeah.
And it's, all of these are something more
Race, everybody's spirits.
Yeah. Yeah.
Living in this community, I mean, it's a strange community, all these old people, and, but, they're just full of themselves. A great diversity of people, and a lot of interests. One of the guys down the hall, his name is Subir, I think I got it right, he's from India. And he's a renowned geophysicist, and he's writing a book about anyway, it's a novel, and it's completely unrelated to his work, his previous work. He has a walker, he's a little guy, but he's great.
Exactly.
He's great to talk.
A lot of energy right away.
Yeah.
He was telling me this morning, I have to tell you how I became a Quaker, and anyway, it's going to be a later discussion.
Sounds like an interesting.
And the place is just loaded with people like that. So that's really healthy.
I should have started.
Yeah.
Take off the shirt and butter too
I'm
much.
gonna go see if I can grab.
There are a lot of people with walkers.
Yeah, a lot.
Good idea.
Walkers are everywhere.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, it's nice like that. It's the,
Oh, yeah. And we don't want people keep offering to bring food, but we don't need that because it's probably not going to be a chance to eat.
Yeah. Right. Right.
I don't
You-
know.
you have to get creative to do it.
That's what we do, people are so
Oh, yeah.
busy.
No, I know, it's really, you have to be as polite as possible.
Yeah. Well, it's good to be clear about
Well, I certainly appreciate the outreach.
Yeah.
Concern.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, people want to do something.
doing great.
They always include, what else can you do? Prayer time and
Just think of it as a schedule. I just kind of part of the week.
thought.
But she's doing great. Yeah, and mom's doing really well.
Doesn't need any toys.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Her. But slowly creeping up. That's fine. You were at first service. It was a pretty good service. I'm looking forward to the sex service. Yeah, I'm anticipating it.
yeah, tethered, exactly. But she's just
So how are you doing with your business?
getting more accustomed to us.
Just because.
No, I screwed it up. You know, we would hold.
Well, you screwed up the.
And it's like, no, that's enough. But she's like, good morning.
Yeah. And you went.
Yeah.
No, you went and tried.
Did she?
John.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Sunday Forum. And we're getting started a few minutes late. We have several speakers from Restorative Actions, which I'm guessing you heard about at the early service. I'll find out more at our second service. Pastor Jermaine Ross Allen is here, as well as Pastor Gregory Bentley, and they're the 2/3 of the theology co-leads for Restorative Actions. And we also have Milissa Carter and Sarah Moore-Nokes. Is that how you say your last name? Okay. And Molly Castle. Is that Castile? And they're the program advocates and admin volunteers for Restorative Actions, which you'll learn all about in minutes. Thank you so much. I also want to mention there'll be time for questions at the end, but if you have questions, we have mics on either side. I'll try to hand you a mic so your question gets recorded for people at home, or if you want to come back and listen later.
Right. Good morning once again, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here, and thank you for this time together. I'm very excited to introduce you to my friends at Restorative Actions. We're just happy to be here to share the good news that repair and reparations are the things that we can lean into right now with our local activity. I'm not going to say too much by way of introduction because folks can introduce themselves and the different parts, but we just want to say that we look forward to not only talking with you today, but we look forward to being in touch with you if you so desire, and I hope you so desire, after this, to help you learn more about what we are up to and what you can do to become a part of this. So without further ado, I believe our first person to speak will be Sarah Moore-Nokes. Gregory, pardon me.
I will bless the Lord at all times. God's praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul makes its boast in the Lord. Let the humble hear thereof and be glad. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt God's name together. I am elephant excited, and hippopotamus happy, and dinosaur delighted to be here with you today. As I stand here, I think about over a month ago, Spelman College, the premier college for black women in these United States, held its 147th convocation. And the speaker for that occasion was distinguished alumna, the Dr. Rua Benjamin. And she said something that caught my attention and has stayed with me to this day. She talked about how, as they look back over the previous 147 years, they looked at the pioneers, they looked at all of the valleys and the mountaintops that the institution had gone through. They looked at all the struggles and all the opportunities for that institution to go out of business, and yet they were still in business 147 years later after its founding. But she said that's not enough just to look back at where they had come from. She said we need to stand right here in 2024 and look 147 years down the road and ask ourselves the pertinent question, what type of ancestors will we become? How will those who come behind us 147 years from now, how will they look back and see us? Will they see us as good ancestors or as bad ancestors? Will they see us as those who sought to become, put more energy into becoming good descendants rather than good ancestors? To put more emphasis on preserving the status quo, or even returning to the status quo ante, than into forming and shaping a thriving future for all of God's children. That has stayed with me, and it really kind of summed up the work that we are up to in Restorative Actions, to become good ancestors. that those who come behind us after we've gone on and are looking over the banisters of heaven, that they will rise up and say, yes, this is how you do it, like this. So I just want to take some time and introduce my friends and colleagues this morning. Oh, it's already there. Thank you. You know, when it comes to this technology thing, I didn't want to have to take my phone out and call my daughters and say, well, how you work this thing here? Somebody's already worked it for me. So I thank God for that. Thank God for somebody who can work the technology. The first person I want to lift up is my dear sister, my friend and colleague, Ilona Street Stewart, who is an elder in the Presbyterian Church, and she's also the Senate executive of the Senate of Lakes and Prairies. And she also served along with me. We served together as co-moderators of the 224th General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church USA, which was a very unique assembly because that was during the height of COVID, and it was totally virtual, the first virtual assembly in the history of the PCUSA. And I must say it was a challenging experience, but also a very fruitful experience. I think much came out of that that has helped us to see much clearer how God is at work in our midst, how God is at work in the PCUSA, how God is at work in our world, and more importantly, how God is calling us to join God in God's redemptive and transformative work in the world. We also have my dear brother, the Reverend Anthony Jermaine Ross Olam, who brought that prophetic word this morning, a timely word, a word that is quite appropriate for this day on which we celebrate the outpouring of the Spirit upon the church, to energize and invigorate the church, to be the church militant, to join Christ in his work of turning the world right side up. Reverend Olam has been stellar in helping to shape the work of the Center for Repair and for Restorative Actions in terms of crafting the language that we use to be precise in what we're up to, that we may have our elevator speech together when we talk to those whose hearts might be inclined toward what God is doing through this work. He's not with us, but we have Elder Jim Kuhn, who is dipping his toes in the waters in Bermuda with his family, but he has been indispensable in our work here today. So we thank God for Jim, who also serves as the Director of Financial Services for the Senate of Lakes and Prairies. We have our dear sister, the Reverend Sarah Moore-Nokes, who's just been wearing many hats. Hello, Sister Sarah. She's been chauffeur. She's been the house whip when we meeting. I mean, she's wielded that thing to the point that I'm sure her rotator cuff is probably suffering from some damage, but she has gotten us on down the road, and we give God thanks for her. She's a member at large of the Winnebago Presbytery in Wisconsin. We have our dear sister Milissa Carter, who's a ruling elder and a member of the Anti-Racism Advocacy Committee, and member of Oak Grove Presbyterian Church in Bloomington, which is, I think, it's been a long time since I've been here. That's not too far from me, is it? Yeah, amen, amen. And Melissa, I came in late. I got held over in Dallas, Fort Worth, and I said, I'm going to wait and eat when I get to Minnesota, and it got so late, but Melissa came through with a ram in the bush. She came with those Pyrex dishes full of goodies, and I went to my hotel room, and I went to sleep well. Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. She's been also been very instrumental in just putting together the infrastructure of restorative actions so we can get going. I mean, it's, much of this work is really not spectacular. it's just getting stuff done on a day-to-day basis, but if you don't do the boring, unspectacular stuff, you can't do the big stuff. There has to be the stuff in place that enables the big event or the spectacle or the impactful occasion. If you don't have this stuff, if you don't have the type of stuff that is unheralded, is not the stuff that gets put on the bulletin board, but it's the stuff that is indispensable in making this work go. So we give you thanks as well, Milissa. We have with us also our dear sister from Oklahoma, the Reverend Molly Castile, and she is no Ogie from Muskogee. We thank her for her work, her insight, her passion, and her wisdom, her investment in this effort to make it go, to make it shine. We are excited about this team and all they have done to bring this to fruition over a relatively short period of time. Oh, I forgot. Philip Romaine, he's not with us today, but he was with us yesterday, but he's the transitional associate pastor for faith formation and lifelong learning at the House of Hope. And I would say that, this team, I guess, what's the word, synergism. When the sum of a thing's parts are greater than them operating apart, I mean, each and every one of these dear friends of mine are powerhouses in their own right, but when they come together, oh man, it's like Voltron. Y'all remember Voltron? Oh man, when they come together, that thing is something else. So we thank God for the gift of synergism. And on this Sunday, which we celebrate that power that makes synergism possible, we thank God. Okay, so what is this stuff all about that we're up to? Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, restorative actions. Restorative actions is born from the intersection of theology, justice, and economics. It allows U.S. Americans who benefit from institutional racism to provide a credible witness to justice by acknowledging the unjust advantages produced by racism and then surrendering the ill-gotten gains of those advantages toward the establishment of just relationships with Afro-American and indigenous community. Some very powerful verbs there. Acknowledge and surrender. And I'll say a little more about that in just a little while. Theology, justice, and economics. I got it this time. Theology, justice, and economics. Restorative Actions provides a mechanism for individuals and interested organizations to examine their assets. Paul said, take an audit of yourself. When you take an audit, it's not just a review, it's not just a glance, but an audit means you look, as we say down in Alabama, from the rooter to the tutor, from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet. An audit is comprehensive, it's exhaustive. So we want to examine our assets, not just glance at, not just take a peek at, but to examine their assets, determine what portion of their wealth can be attributed to white supremacy, and surrender, not be compelled, not guilt-tripped, but surrender, a voluntary act, an act of the will, an act of the heart. Surrender that amount to one or more for trust to increase opportunities for indigenous and Afro-American individuals and communities in the United States to flourish. Restorative Actions is an opportunity to respond by surrendering the portion of our wealth that should have gone to others. It seeks to answer the question, what can we do? Not what should have been done, not what I should do, but what can we do, and more importantly, what must we do, and what will we do? By providing one avenue to work toward economic democracy, decolonizing wealth, creating parity, and eventually putting pressure on the United States to take action regarding reparations. Restorative Actions is an economic justice initiative with a decidedly narrow scope that provides a mechanism, congregations, councils, individuals, and other interested organizations to examine their assets, determine what portion of their wealth can be attributed to the very inequities white supremacy is organized to accumulate and reproduce, and then surrender a portion of those funds to be used for the flourishing of Afro-American and indigenous people and communities in the United States. Restorative Actions is one way that we, as citizens, answer the question, what can we do about systemic inequity? And I just want to say a word about justice, particularly biblical justice. When we hear justice in our context, we usually think of it punitively. Think about somebody's done wrong and we got to get them. We got to give them their just desserts. But we want to think a little differently about justice. We want to think about it biblically in the sense of being distributive and restorative. What are you talking about, Brother Preacher? Well, biblical justice is about distributing what God has giving us in such a way that all of us can flourish. It's not just about the flourishing of the human family, but of the whole created order. That's what biblical justice is about. It's not about everybody having the same thing. It's about us having what we need to flourish, to live into the fullness of who God created us to be, to live into the fullness of God's purpose. But it's also restorative. It recognizes that there's brokenness. It recognizes that there is inequity. It recognizes that there's disparity. So biblical justice is about how do we close the gap? How do we restore that which has been broken? How do we bind up that which has been bruised and battered and bereft so it looks like a reality that God intended it to look like? So we thank you, beloved, for being here with us today. We thank you for your interest in this, and we appreciate your attention as we continue to unpack this ministry of restorative actions. Thank you, and God bless you.
Good morning. So now you're going to see why Gregory's on the theology side and I'm on the administrative side, because we're going to talk about some numbers. But before I dive into this, I want you to know this is the shortest version of these numbers. And Jim Kuhn, who's not here with us, has spent, I don't know, maybe a full year of his life, waking hours now, diving deeply into these numbers. And if you have interest and you want to know more, we can hook you up. So don't be shy about being in touch with us. But just generally, we want to talk about why restorative actions or why reparations are necessary to begin with. I imagine this is not news to you. But just to be clear, the average, well, let me do this. Over the last half century, the average wealth held by individuals in white households has grown exponentially. So I know that the text is small, but the white growth is the green bar, right? It's that very, very steep curve. The black bar that is hard to see is Afro-Americans. The red bar is indigenous, and those blue dots are the averages, right? So you see this huge, huge disparity, and that's what we're trying to, that's our starting place. Now, we just talked about averages, but we're gonna jump now to medians, because medians are actually more accessible to folks to understand in their individual households. As of 2002, the median white household held $240,000 and $261,000 more than Afro and Indigenous households, respectively. So again, the green line is the median household wealth for white folks. The black line is the median household wealth for Afro-American families, and the red line is the median household wealth for Indigenous folks. The biggest problem, well, I won't say the biggest problem, but one of the really big problems is that these disparities are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? So it would be one thing, I guess, if we weren't, if we were holding steady, but we're not even doing that. So what we're seeking to do is we're seeking to figure out a way to work toward parity. This graph shows that dotted white line would be the parity mark. And if every household were distributed equally in the United States, that parity line would be about $284,000 as a median for household wealth across the board, with no disparity between white, black, and indigenous. We have one more here. This is again, an example of how the curve has gone exceptionally fast and exceptionally high for white households in particular. And the number that maybe you want to keep in mind is sort of the high level, the number that we're aiming to repair is that 16 trillion number. So white households hold, as a collective, $16 trillion more than black and indigenous households as a collective. $16 trillion is a big number. It can feel like a scary number. It can feel like an impossible number, but it is actually not an impossible number. We like to say that reparations are right, necessary, and possible. And I will confess to you that $16 trillion did not feel possible to me when I started this work. But my colleagues over here have done incredible work convincing me that it is actually possible. And we're not the only ones who think so. Again, we can dive into more of those references and details if you're interested at another time. But for this, I want to leave you with 16 trillion is big. It's not impossible. It's not impossible because what it would take is about 14%. It would take about 14% of collective white income, or collective white wealth, to bring us to parity, where all of our households across the United States would roughly be in the same place. Do we think that's going to happen very quickly? No, we don't think it's going to happen very quickly. Will it happen that everyone lands at the median? Of course not. We will always have folks above and below the median. But 14% is actually a very achievable percentage of wealth for the vast majority of us. And we want to leave you with for the numbers portion of this, with that number, that it would not take an excessive amount of anyone's wealth in order for us to begin to repair the significant damage that has been done and work toward a much more justice-based reality for all of us. We're going to move to the very, very specifics of how this works.
So the mechanism for transferring funds is fairly straightforward. There will be a total of 4 trusts, 2 trusts for Indigenous funds and 2 trusts for Afro-American funds. But before we discuss the details, we want to pause for a minute to talk about the language we're using. Let's start with Afro-American.
So, depending on how long you've been alive, the term Afro-American might strike your ears as a little bit antiquated. And I think the current term that we're most familiar with is African-American. There's a very specific reason why we use the term Afro-American, and I won't read all this prose to you, but it's on our website for you to look at it in detail. But there are 2 concerns in using the term Afro-American, and one is not more important than the other, but they work together. One, we need to be very clear as trusts. Especially, we need to be clear to the IRS. I don't need to tell you that clarity with the IRS is almost always a good thing. And the clarity that they require is that the trustees who will have the responsibility of distributing the wealth that is surrendered, the question is, how do they know to whom those funds should be distributed and to whom are they not to be distributed? And so being specific about the lineage of those individuals who have inherited the deficits of chattel slavery on the basis of race and an emancipation without compensation. It's very clear to distinguish people who have inherited those economic legacies, combined with the economic legacies that stem from redlining and other features of Jim Crow, social life and economics. That's a distinct group of people whose harms require very specific remedies. And secondarily, we embrace this term Afro-American because it allows us to be in what I like to call functional solidarities. Restorative Actions has a decidedly narrow focus, but Restorative Actions also acknowledges that there are many peoples around the globe who are in processes of attempting to recover from slavery, colonization, the defilement of land as a result of nuclear weapons testing, etc. And while we affirm the right and the necessity and the possibility of those groups who have faced those harms to receive reparations, we are very clear that we're not equipped to do all of that at the same time. And by naming the Afro-Americans as such, and not merely naming everyone black, we avoid a very tricky problem. And the problem that we seek to avoid in that sense is to avoid categorizing every person who looks something like me or some variation like me. If we name everyone black, then when it comes to reparations, we have to, after the fact, distinguish, well, not you, not you, not you, not you, which that doesn't really make for solidarity. What we acknowledge is that when it comes to correcting the generational harms of Jim Crow and redlining and all of that range of things, it's the United States government that is both competent and responsible to even that out and to pay that moral and national debt. And at the same time, we also acknowledge, champion, and uphold the right for the people, for example, of Haitian descent, to pursue reparations for the fact that they were forced to pay restitution to France simply for having deprived the French of the transgenerational benefits of enslaving the Haitians, and the Jamaicans with regard to the British and the Ghanaians, et cetera, et cetera. So the term Afro-American is very important because it allows us to name the distinct group that our trusts seek to benefit and help to flourish, while also preventing us from having an unnecessarily and an unfortunate contentious relationship with the other members of the African diaspora globally. And now we will hear about the indigenous trusts.
Once again, the slide is going to have a lot more words on it. So the term indigenous at this moment in time is the most inclusive of all people who originate from the land that we call the United States. You'll note that the strategy for these trusts are different than the Afro-American Trust. In this case, we're using language that is broadly inclusive because there are many names used to identify these sovereign nations, some of whom are recognized by the U.S. government. So back to how does it work? My colleague Jermaine mentioned the IRS, and that is in fact the structure that we are required to live within in order to be a funding group. So we have 4 trusts. Each set of trusts is constructed with a private trust and a private charitable trust in order to be able to distribute funds to a variety of kinds of recipients, including 501c3 organizations, but also organizations that do not have 501c3 and to individuals. We structured these trusts with as much freedom as possible for the trustees to do the repair work they discern. The decisions about distributions will be made by those trustees who are representatives of the communities the trusts are intended to benefit. This means that Indigenous individuals will be trustees of the Indigenous Trust and Afro-Americans will be trustees of the Afro-American Trust.
Another offering we have is the Time for Repair curriculum. This is one conversation, one way for your congregation to really discern why reparations are right, necessary, and possible, and also why this conversation belongs in the church. Through this curriculum, you will learn that this conversation started in the church, both from a perspective of individuals seeking reparations, but also ministers and church members who used baptism and Christianity as a weapon against enslaved Africans and recently emancipated Africans to prevent them from flourishing in the United States. This curriculum comes with a number of resources because it is a complex topic that takes time and care to have congregation members feel safe and open to these discussions. There are facilitator notes for the preacher to use that will help guide them in conversations that may be tougher. There is a full script so that the facilitator does not need to go about and research each of the pastors that are referenced in there, or the historical figures, the sermons that are used as examples, and so on. The full curriculum has Google Slides that are already packaged and ready to use, as well as a participant journal, because as participants are moving through this process, they may feel the need not to use their words, and they may feel the need to write down some things that they are feeling, thinking, want to discern. And then also an annotated bibliography, because there are so many resources out there that are necessary to learn and understand the history, the complex history of this nation, and what Christianity did that caused us to be in the situation that we are today, and how we make that repair. This curriculum is set up to be a 5-week class. However, you can break it up into 2 classes per session to be a 10-week class. We extended the time at Oak Grove. We did use it at Oak Grove, where I am at, and it takes time. And 2-hour sessions may be a lot, not just for someone to dedicate that 2 hours, but to also get through. There may be breaks needed to take a pause and work through some things individually. And that's the purpose, because we want folks to sit in this and discern why reparations are right, necessary, and possible, and why reparations belong in the church, why that conversation belongs here. You can get access to the curriculum by going to our website. There is a request form there. It is a fee-based program based on how large your congregation is. But mind you, the price tag on that is more of a stipend to reimburse Pastor Germain for the effort that he has put forth in creating this curriculum, as well as a portion goes back to Restorative Actions. And if you have any questions on it, you can always reach out to admin at Restorative Actions, and we can provide more details. And I'm going to pass it back over to Jermaine.
All right, so you may be wondering who is already participating. I don't know if you know the structure of the Presbyterian Church, but Google is your friend in this regard, and and so I'll simply say that the Synod of Lakes and Prairies, aside from being, a great support of this initiative, they have been one of the first to surrender. Did we say? I think we talked about why we use the term surrender. But in the Q&A, if you've got questions, you can ask us some questions about our terminology. But as of, and I'll just read this here so I can make sure I get the numbers right, because numbers and memory don't work together for me. But as of, let's see, where are we? And I'm getting old and my contact lenses are not working. At the recommendation of its steering committee, the Synod Assembly voted 27-1 in October 2020 to commit 15% of its undesignated net assets, totaling more than $350,000. So, I mean, in everybody's world, that's a lot of money. In Presbyterian world, that's a lot of money, especially on a local level. But it represents the faithfulness of people who are responding to the Holy Spirit's prompting to recognize that what has happened for the past 200 years does not characterize what is possible for the next 200. and Oak Grove Presbyterian Church in Bloomington, where I formerly served as an associate pastor. At the recommendation of its Anti-Racism Advocacy Committee, Oak Grove Session voted unanimously in February 2021 to commit 15% of its undesignated net assets, totaling $267,000. So again, for a local church and a local congregation, this is a substantial amount that reflects the working of the Holy Spirit on individual human hearts, just like your own. And then our individuals have made one-time smaller surrenders, as well as they've committed 15% of retirement assets by naming the trusts as beneficiary on IRAs. These funds will transfer tax-free upon the individuals reaching the age of 70 and a half. Let's see. So when it comes to surrenders, again, as has been said before, there are multiple ways to receive payment of a debt. And we believe that it is the power of the Holy Spirit in this moment and in this place and at this time to move in our hearts and to inspire each other to determine that even as we call upon the federal government to do what only the federal government is responsible and capable of doing, the Spirit of God moves us now. And it moves us to ask, what can we do right now? And these beginnings that you see on the screen are just the beginning of what the Holy Spirit is going to do in a much bolder and dramatic way, not only here locally, but across our nation and across our world. How is it that you stay in touch with us? I am glad you asked. And I got the right button. So this is a little small. I don't know if you can see it, but Pastor Seth, it looks like Pastor Seth has an idea.
I have to go get ready for the next service. Invite me to join us momentarily.
That is a great idea. All right. So at restorativeactions.org, you can visit our website and you can get more of the details about how we've produced the numbers that we're sharing with you and other things. And you can sign up for our monthly newsletter also at that very same address. And you can request that the team from Restorative Actions comes to has a conversation with you about our program, how you can be involved, and even for our curriculum. So all of that, just visit our website, restorativeactions.org. And if you see our phone numbers, our email addresses, don't hesitate to just give us a call or just email us, because we like to hear from all of you. I am going to do two things. One, I am going to make my way toward the sanctuary, because I hear that I'm supposed to be preaching a sermon soon. And I will leave you with my wonderful colleagues, and they'll be happy to engage any questions that you might have for them. And again, thank you so much for being willing to listen. Thank you.
So questions, we have a mic if you have any. Anyone?
We've done this intro slide deck a number of times, and mostly what happens when we're done and we say, do you have questions? People stare at us because it's a lot of information to take in, right? So that's totally fine. I do see a question in the back, but we also want you to know, it's a lot of information to take in. So take your time, sit with it, and know that we are available anytime that you'd like to be in touch. But yes, question in the back.
Once the funds have resources in them, how, what's the timing, or have you even thought to the timing, or just the administration of that?
Yep.
How, when do disbursements start?
So on the Afro-American side, the trust mechanism is already in place, and our trustees are actually meeting in person for the first time tomorrow. They've had several meetings online, but are meeting in person for the first time tomorrow to start making distributions on the Afro-American side of things. Yeah, it's really great. The indigenous side, the indigenous mechanism is not yet put together because we were going to build them in parallel, and then we discovered that's not possible given the very different experiences of those communities. And so we put all of our energy into one side and have got that built and up and running, and now are going to be turning and looking toward building the mechanism on the indigenous side. The idea is that distributions can be made as often as monthly. In these early days, I doubt that that's aspirational at this point. But once we have a regular rhythm, there is an intention that the money comes in and then the money gets used immediately. We're not trying to preserve wealth here. That's a really important part of what we've designed in the trusts themselves. We really want this money to be put to use right now in the communities that need it right now. I don't need to be the one if you want to.
My name is Lynn Hinkle. Greetings from George Floyd Square. No justice, no streets. It's really critical for people in this room to understand that there is a really vital, growing, deep-seated reparations movement in the Twin Cities as I speak. We had a conference about 2 months ago. 150 people attended that conference. As reparationists, Jim Kuhn gave a presentation about restorative actions. We had folks from Sacred Reckonings, which is a faith-based organization that's doing reparations work and has developed what they call an ecosystem for reparations. They call it wealth transfer. Not necessarily surrender, but it's the same mechanism, basically. Traherne Cruz, who is the founder of Black Lives Matter in Minnesota, as it turns out, is one of the members of the Restorative Action Afro-American Trustee Group. Traherne is now the chair of the Reparations Commission, the Permanent Reparations Commission in St. Paul. I'm going on a little bit because I want people here to understand that the reparations movement is a rich and vital organization or set of organizations that hopefully Plymouth Congregational Church will decide to become part of. It's not by way of diminishing the work that Restorative Actions has done. It's to elevate the fact that there's a movement of a lot of different organizations. And actually, you need to take stock of the fact that when you look at organizations around the country, the reparations movement in the Twin Cities really is being held up as a best practice. And Restorative Actions is a critical piece of how that best practice has emerged.
No, thank you for your comments. I mean, we often say restorative actions is one way, but there are lots of ways that this work is happening.
So you mentioned that there's an opportunity to have classes, or sessions. I don't know what you call them, classes or sessions.
So the curriculum that Milissa talked about is a curriculum that you can purchase from us. It's all put together with facilitator notes and slides, and it's meant to be led by one of your pastoral leaders with a adult faith formation group, and can be done over a series of 5 or 10 weeks. And you can absolutely email admin at Restorative Actions, and you'll get to Milissa, and she will answer every question you have about it if you want details.
So it's a question maybe for the RGI people, RJI, whatever. I'm not part of that, but I'm wondering if there's a plan for that to happen here at Plymouth. And maybe that's a question for them rather than you.
We are unaware of a plan, but you should absolutely ask them.
I think it would be, yeah, I mean, I'd be interested. I mean, there's a lot of details that I think I would like to know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
There's a mic over here. Oh, come over.
It's just a short question. How long have you been operative in terms of the funds and so forth for the African American place? And
So
I'm trying to get an idea of timeline.
Right. Our first meeting there were conversations that happened prior to our first official meeting. I like to say that every good thing starts at our General Assembly in the bar, which is in fact where the very first conversations around this took place. But our first official meeting was in the summer of 2020, and we built our team over that fall and into that spring. We did a ton of foundational work that first year. And then in 2020, as we noted, the Synod made the inaugural surrender, followed in 2021 by Oak Grove, and then we've had, again, individuals and other smaller surrenders over the last couple of years. So the total, we're coming up on our 4th year of being in a group, and in terms of our formal, the IRS has recognized us for about 18 months. That's probably the easiest way to say it. Yeah.
I want to call an end to this formally. It doesn't mean people can't stay and ask questions. You're welcome to. But I just thank you so much. And thank you for your work and for all of you being here. It's, anyway, I'm just really impressed. And this is our last session of Sunday Forums for the spring, but we will have sessions once a month on the second Sundays of the month. And hope you'll join us here or from your cabin or wherever you are. So you can do that remotely. Thank you so much. Stay and chat if you'd like.